Unpopular opinion: Resident Evil 4 is an overrated gaming experience. Ever since it came out, Resi 4 has been praised as this mastercraft of a video game, and as of today is considered one of the best video games of all time, period. And boy, I could not disagree with that more. Now don't get me wrong, I don't think Resident Evil 4 is a bad game. I actually think it's a pretty good game. But is it anywhere near a masterpiece? Not even close. This game has so many glaring problems that it boggles my mind that people think that it's this good. Now I do have to admit, this game made Resident Evil into the franchise it is today. If RE4 ended up any different from the game that we got, we likely would have never gotten any more titles and Resident Evil would have never become a household name. Now, I've been talking pretty general about this game so far, so let's get into the specifics. First, let's talk about what I enjoy. The combat system is extremely fun and intuitive. Shooting enemies in the head and then running up to them to perform a melee attack is extremely satisfying and rewarding, albeit a little repetitive after a while, but I'll get into that later. All the weapons are unique and have different uses, forcing you to make use of your entire loadout. I also have to mention the storage system. This is by far the best item management system in any game ever. Other games have tried replicating this, but have never managed to capture the magic that RE4 did. And that's all the game really has going for it. The positives do bring this game to the point it needs to be a great game, but the negatives drag it down by a good margin. So, let's get into the negatives. Let's start with the biggest negative. The game is just far too long. Resident Evil 4 takes about 15 to 20 hours to complete, which is almost unheard of compared to the rest of the series. Resident Evil games are supposed to be short with high replay value, and RE4 is long with low replay value. Now I know that might be a controversial statement, as I know many people replay RE4 all the time, and will have to heavily disagree with me. But let me explain why I feel this way. In 2013, Naughty Dog released The Last of Us, to both fan and critical acclaim. The Last of Us was praised for its emotionally compelling story that captivated many people that never thought that type of storytelling would ever come from a video game. The game was constantly praised in every aspect except for one thing: the gameplay. The Last of Us had very mediocre gameplay. Its gameplay consisted of only the basic shooting and taking cover. On its own, the gameplay would make for a very generic experience, but the game manages to captivate you through the story, negating the need for interesting gameplay. The lackluster gameplay is barely even noticeable unless you think about it, as you are so distracted with the brilliant story unfolding before you. Now, Resident Evil games are not known for their plot, but they are usually just interesting and just charming enough to motivate gameplay. Now, the plot of RE4 does have the typical charm and intrigue necessary for a good RE game, but the reason the story never manages to captivate you like the other games is because the big plot points are so few and far between, courtesy of the runtime. The written story was not intended for a long game, and it becomes more blatantly obvious every time Ashley gets captured. You can tell the developers realized the story was really dragging in the middle, and kept taking her away in order to artificially raise the stakes and reach the set pieces they wanted. Now, even if RE4 was a short game, I don't think the overall story even stands out as one of the better RE tales. The story literally consists of Ashley gets captured, then Ashley gets rescued, then Ashley gets captured again, then Ashley gets rescued again, then Ashley gets kidnapped again, all with a few side characters sprinkled here and there. On top of all that, I think RE4's Leon is the weakest iteration of the character yet. Here, Leon has almost zero character. His only character trait is that he's an action badass. He has minimal personality and nothing the audience can empathize with. Lewis is a more complex character than Leon. He actually has an emotional motivation, trying to atone for this mess he helped create. And he only has like 5 minutes of screen time.
Why are you? It makes me feel better. Let's just leave it at that.
It also doesn't help that Leon just sounds super bored. And it stands out when the other performances are full of personality. It's a shame, considering the actor for Leon has the talent, proven by his performance as the merchant.
Got something that might interest you.
Anyway, I think I've ranted on long enough about the story. Let's get into the gameplay. Now, you might be confused, as I've praised the gameplay as the best part of RE4, but trust me when I say it still has flaws. Now, despite the fact that the gameplay is technically good, the combat can get quite repetitive. Once again, all thanks to the long runtime. Even when the game tries to spice it up, you still end up doing the same old shooting and kicking, causing the combat to really become stale after a while. It gets to the point where you're just mindlessly shooting and performing melee attacks. The boss fights in this game are also extremely freaking boring. With only a few exceptions, most of the fights are just mindless shooting while running in a circle. Almost nothing differentiates these boss fights from one another apart from the boss's appearance. By the time I got to the Salazar fight and I realized it was, once again, just running around in a circle and waiting for his weak point to be exposed, I just pulled up my rocket launcher and shot that little shit in the face. And if the game wasn't already boring enough, the game forces you to go around breaking barrels and crates in order to obtain the resources you need to progress in the game. At first it's a minor annoyance, but it quickly becomes tedious and irritating, as they are extremely prominent throughout the whole game. You probably couldn't go 3 minutes without seeing a crate. But with everything this game gets wrong, there is one thing, one sin that this game does that is worse than everything I've already talked about, combined. And to be fair, it doesn't even really make the game itself bad, but the one thing this game gets wrong is that it's called Resident Evil. There is nothing that connects this game to the rest of the series outside of 2 names. The game has no zombies, a giant castle, a giant robot, a freaking wizard, a midget zombie pirate man, an 8-foot tall Ben Kingsley, and the worst of all, no horror. This game does not even attempt horror once. Instead, the game goes for the outlandish action set pieces, making you forget that you're supposed to be playing a horror game. It makes me wonder why people don't like this, but they like this.